So this is mainly a story about the news media, but it's also a story about unions, and unions are going to figure into this, and I mean, it's just amazing to me how much workers don't want unions, and yet that's not the impression you get. And so here, you're going to see the collusion between unions and the news media that goes way back to the 1990s. I mean, this is nothing new. It was never anything new. And this is involving a grocery store chain called Food Lion, and that is local originally to my home state of North Carolina, which is a right-to-work state, which means, you can't force people to join a union. So then they expanded. They were originally Food Town, and then they expanded into some other regions where there are other stores named Food Town, so they changed it to Food Lion. I guess the reason why was because they had a lion in their logo. I don't know why they had a lion in their logo. I don't know where that comes from. But basically, when they expanded in there, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union tried to get Food Lion to unionize. And it's here in this story, I think, is that you need like 30% of the workers to agree to join the union in order to unionize. And if you can't get that much support for it, well, then you don't unionize. So that's what had happened. And so this is basically a story about revenge of the unions against Food Lion and enlisting ABC's news arm into doing that. Yeah, it's interesting. My wife works at Harris Teeter, which is a local chain. It's based in Matthews. Again, right to work. It's owned by Kroger, but it has its own corporate structure. So Kroger, I believe, is based in Cincinnati, and the United Food and Commercial Workers Union governs that. And so if you work for Kroger, you have to work for that union. You have to join that union. But if you work for Harris Teeter, you don't. Well, they want to move workers between one and the other. But since you're hired by an individual store, you can only move to another store if the employee agrees to it. Well, the thing is, the employees who work at Harris Teeter don't want to go to work for a Kroger because they don't want to have to join the union. The ones who work for Kroger really want to go work for Harris Teeter so they can get away from the union. So that should tell you everything you need to know. So you may or may not have heard about this, or if you're old enough, you may or may not remember it. It was big news. ABC had to pay Food Lion over $5.5 million in punitive damages for basically a hit piece on Primetime Live, where they made all sorts of crazy charges against Food Lion, like deliberately selling spoiled food or, food they had, covered with Clorox or whatever. And the jury found that ABC got the story by fraud. It was completely false. But even then, they didn't even admit that they had been deceitful. They kept saying that, well, this is freedom of the press, but that's not freedom of the press. There's a difference between reporting the news and creating the news, and this was creating the news. And they also said that Food Lion has done so without ever challenging the truth of our broadcast, which is not true at all. Food Lion challenged it all over the place. But what they had said was that, they didn't because otherwise they would have sued them for libel. And keep that point in mind because it's going to come up why they weren't able to actually sue for libel. But it wasn't because they weren't alleging deliberate wrongdoing. They actually were, and they proved it all over the place. ABC's news reporters and journalists engaged in deliberate fraud to try to lie about what Food Lion was doing and the kind of the kind of food they were serving to their customers. So, so they had run this story. We'll get into it. A lot of this case is about 45 hours of video outtakes, which is film they didn't use in the actual story. And it wasn't until they were able to get a hold of this video that they found out the full extent of ABC's mendacity as this Accuracy in Media article shows. By the way, this article, I'm not sure why it isn't on their website anymore. Maybe it's just too old and they don't keep them online that much. So the link is to the archive, the Internet Archive page of it. But, I mean, it wasn't like retracted because it's not true. No, this is completely true. So, ABC lawyers fought tooth and nail against the release of these outtakes, during which the 1-year statute of limitations for a libel case expired. So they ran out the clock on them. That was why, they couldn't sue for libel, but with the video evidence in hand, Food Lion sought to extend its case to include libel. ABC successfully kept the libel count out of the suit, and then they used that to say, well, they didn't challenge the truth of our broadcast. Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. The truth of that broadcast was way challenged all over the place, so. This is a story all about how a hostile union enlisted ABC News as a winning partner in a campaign to destroy Food Lion, and how its officers helped ABC producers concoct the lies that enabled them to get jobs at the grocery chain. The undercover producers performed the food handling mischief themselves, and the narration work done by Diane Sawyer did not match the images being shown to the public. ABC producers tried to lure Food Lion workers into violating company rules on the handling of food, unsuccessfully, I might add. And finally, ABC News, the most powerful TV network, set facts on their head in an attempt to deceive the public as to the significance of the jury verdict. And a spokesman for Accuracy in Media told ABC News the day of the verdict why journalists now have less credibility with the American public than do professional wrestlers. Gotta love that, but it's true. It's true, so. Again, this is all an act of revenge from the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. There's a little bit of history of Food Lion here. It began in 1957 as Food Town, just up the road from me in Salisbury. That's not too far from here. And it was bought and then expanded and became Food Lion to over 1,000 stores in 1994 with 65,500 employees, annual sales of $82 billion. And the union wanted their share of that mad money. So, under federal law, 30% of workers have to sign cards asking the National Labor Relations Board to hold a representation election. So, it takes 30% to say, let's hold an election to see if we unionize, and then they go and see if they can unionize. But workers were already earning salaries and benefits equal to or higher than those at unionized stores. And so this is something else they see. It's like, hey, we're already getting this. Why should we give up that money paying you dues? What are we going to get for that? Just show us what benefit that we're going to get from these union dues, and they can't ever do it. They can't ever do it. So the campaign was a flop. They fell far short of the 30% minimum. And the UFCW's they even sound like a professional wrestling organization, don't they? The UFCW's embarrassing failure followed a trend to distressing to labor barons. The fact that workers no longer consider unions relevant. Membership has declined to less than 15% of the workforce in 1996, from a peak of 35.4% in 1945. And even to this day, you'll hear leftists and Democrats and progressives talking about that. Oh, it's so horrible that people aren't being represented by unions. It's the workers' own choice. They could join these unions if they want to. They don't want to. They don't want to. But I suppose the politicians know better. Alright, so yes, this is all about the UFCW getting revenge. With much public fanfare, the UFCW launched what labor people call a corporate campaign to punish Food Lion and its owners because employees refused to unionize. And William H. Wynn, the UFCW president, told Progressive Grocer magazine in January 1986, "Our goal is simple, to hurt the employer economically." Yep, these people are thugs. That's what they are. They're just thugs. And then you have Thomas McNutt, another union official, told Regardes that the UFCW intended to bleed Food Lion economically until they either agree to do business with him or are forced out of business. If we can't organize them, the best thing to do is to erode their business as much as possible. Well, now, if you destroy their business, how's that going to help the workers? We've seen this before, the union just goes against them, forces them out of business, and now all the workers are out of jobs, and they're unemployed. So, how are they benefiting the worker there? So, the ABC producer was Lynn Litt. She worked in the Atlanta bureau. She had never done a primetime live segment before. And just a note here that Litt married during the course of litigation. She was called Lynn Dale in court papers. For consistency, references herein shall be to Litt. So, she got a tip from a Washington publicist named Neil Lattimore. A veteran activist, Lattimore has a long background in public relations for labor unions, and he is now, as of the writing of this, press secretary for First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton. Yep, it's all the same good old boys network there. She wrote a story proposal focusing on union claims that Food Lion employees were forced to work off the clock. The union, paying lawyer fees for former employees, were willing to sue the chain. Despite this background, Litt would later claim that she knew nothing of the corporate campaign which the union was waging against the chain, which, even read through the parts I'm skipping, you'll see how false that is. And another producer was Susan Barnett, and their contacts were Elaine Dodge and Tom Devine of the Washington group called the Government Accountability Project, or GAP, an offshoot of the Institute for Policy Studies, a far-left think tank. GAP was working with the UFCW to interview former Food Lion workers in search for wage hour violations which could be used to harass the chain in court. GAP gave Barnett a sheaf of affidavits from the workers, actually unsworn statements, so they're not actually affidavits, that's why it's in scare quotes, because affidavits are sworn documents under penalty of perjury. These were unsworn statements taken by summer interns, some of which had been rewritten by Dodge. The bulk had not even been signed. More than half of these persons had been involved in litigation against Food Lion, and hence could not be considered objective sources. ABC's eventual on-camera interview pool consisted of 7 persons supplied by the UFCW. Only one was still employed by Food Lion. The others had been away from the store for 1 to almost 5 years, but all 7 had something in common. Each was being represented, without cost, by UFCW lawyers in suits against Food Lion. Anchor Diane Sawyer let pass without challenge the assertion by one woman, "I don't even know these gentlemen." Another claimed he feared being fired for talking about Food Lion on the air. In fact, he had already testified at a congressional hearing and was a plaintiff in 3 suits against the grocer. How worried can you be about being fired for speaking out if you've already given congressional testimony? According to Sawyer, Primetime went undercover so we would have independent verification of what our 70 sources told us. But was this sweeping claim true? Producer Litt admitted to this representation in a deposition in July 1996. Is it fair to say that at the time you went undercover at Food Lion, you had not spoken to 70 sources? Litt says yes. Would it be incorrect to say that the reason you went undercover was to confirm allegations about Food Lion that you had received from 70 different sources? And Litt says yes. ABC was unwilling to admit the union's role in the story even after the jury verdict. Rune Aldridge's formal statement said only, "We had reports from a number of current and former Food Lion employees about deceptive, unsanitary, and unsafe food handling practices that were said to be widespread in its stores." Arledge did not mention that the UFCW had inspired these official investigations, much less its partnership with the union. Food Lion accused the media of being de facto allies of unions who want to hurt their targets. And they said, it is a commonplace assumption among the public that journalists, acting autonomously, come up with all their own story ideas and, through independent research, uncover all of their facts. The truth is, however, that ideas from stories come from many places, most of them outside the news organization itself, and the information that journalists gather has often been conditioned by some individual or organization with a vested interest in the story. Journalists are often dependent for their information on interested parties in ways of which they are unaware. Unions, like other special interests, are skilled at providing for the needs of journalists by staging so-called media events, by providing ideas and background research, and perhaps most importantly, by generating the appearance of conflict in each instance with the presumed failings of the target company as the subject of the story. So, this little prepackaged story from the USCW was enough to satisfy Barnett. She wrote a story idea memo of some 500 words entitled Something Rotten at Food Lion without even a perfunctory attempt to get Food Lion's side of the story. Some excerpts give the flavor of how she intended to present her piece. Welcome to the Great American Grocery Store, where they alter expiration dates. Rotten meat is ground into hamburger and deli salads, and that fish, well, they washed it in bleach and perfumed it with lemon. I feel I have to keep pointing this out. None of this was true. None of it. If you shop at one of their 800-plus stores, say employees of Food Lion, you're paying good money for bad food. And Food Lion, one of the nation's fastest-growing supermarket chains covering 11 states, they say, is laughing all the way to the bank. The warehouses are worse, where mice nest in bulk foods for the store's bakery goods, shake a bag of rice, and mice scatter. Really? Meat and poultry sit in the hot sun on the docks for hours because there is either no room in the refrigerated areas, not enough employees to move the shipments expeditiously, or the refrigerated units are broken. I propose that we go undercover at Food Lion to see just what lurks in the grocer's aisle. Barnett later admitted to Food Lion lawyers that she did not have personal knowledge of any of these allegations. Alright, going here into part 2, which is about ABC's undercover operation. Ira Rosen, senior producer, decided to merge the Barnett-Litt proposals into a single story. Food Lion lawyers would ask Rosen later whether anyone at the network raised any question as to how two producers, as far apart as these two, were coming up with the same story idea. No, Rosen said, it was one of those coincidences. We find astounding his lack of editorial curiosity. One of the dogs is barking. I don't know if you can hear that. Probably okay. So, in deposition, Food Lion lawyer John Walsh asked Barnett, "So you asked him to lie?" "Yes," the producer replied. "Did you ask yourself what, in your work as a journalist, would justify telling lies to get information?" Litt replied, "I knew from my 10 years' experience at ABC News that there are some limited circumstances in which it's appropriate to tell a lie." That's all you need to know, I think. In all, 5 persons working for ABC sent a total of 20 job applications to various Food Lion stores. Only Barnett and Litt actually took jobs. So Litt worked for Food Lion for about 2 weeks, Barnett 1 week. So what did they find? Sawyer, who narrated the show, claimed, "We remind you, Primetime went undercover so we would have independent verifications of what our 70 non-existent sources told us." The verification, they didn't exist. The 70 sources didn't exist. The verification consisted of grainy video images and a number of quotes from employees who were cooperating with Barnett and Litt. For instance, former employee Gene Bull said, "They take that pork that's already starting to get a slime to it, and it gets what they call a halo, a kind of a green tinge to it. And they take that and put it in the sausage grinder, then they put it back out there for anywhere from 7 to 10 days as fresh, homemade sausage, and it's rotten." Well, something's rotten, but I don't think it's a sausage. Other interviewees claimed that Food Lion encouraged employees to soak spoiled ham or fish in Clorox to get rid of rotten odors, to sell cheese that had been gnawed by rats, and to remove the sell-by dates from meats and other goods with nail polish remover. Another former employee, Vonnie Simpson, said, "Fish has a 3-day shelf life. Okay, after 3 days you're supposed to reduce it and sell it or you throw it away. But we don't do that. We soak the fish in baking soda, and then we'd squirt lemon juice on them and put it back in the case and sell it for 3 more days. The fish would be so rotten it would crumble in your hand." Again, I feel I have to point it out, none of this is true. It's all a pack of lies. And the images tumbled out for more than 12 minutes. Hands packaging meat while Sawyer's voiceover talked about extending sales dates, shots of filthy meat cutting equipment, deli food supposedly left on sale long after its expiration date. Millions of Americans who watch Primetime Live reacted in disgust. At Accuracy in Media, we watched the segment several times, and an important point soon became clear. Regardless of what Anchor Sawyer was telling viewers, the undercover videos did not match what was being shown on the screen. Where, for instance, was photographic proof that workers doused rotten fish in Clorox? And how could the stench of the powerful detergent be expunged from any fish so exposed? To borrow language from the ABC script, the segment seemed so rotten it would crumble in your hand. We would later tabulate 16 specific charges of misconduct made against Food Lion. As shall be seen, the vast majority proved either utterly false or misrepresentations of what actually happened in the store. But not for many more months would the extent of ABC's deception be proven. In the meanwhile, Food Lion suffered, just as the United Food and Commercial Workers Unions had intended when they enlisted a witting ABC News as their ally in a corporate campaign designed to destroy a business. So, the aftermath of a lie, October 1992. The ABC network began airing promos on the segment aimed at building audiences for the so-called sweeps period that will begin in November, and that has to do with the rating system that U.S. broadcast networks use. The ratings are basically how many people are watching a show at a given time, but they have these sweeps periods where the advertisers are actually looking at that and they really pay attention to what's going on during those sweeps periods, because that helps define what is the advertising rates for the next however long, 3 months or 6 months or whatever is going to be. And so like you have a sweeps period in November, I think you have another one like about March or April, something like that. So it's all about the ratings. Food Lion stock dropped $214 million in a single day, another $666 million the 2 days immediately before the broadcast as the promo ads continued. The days after the airing, stock plummeted another $629 million for a loss of about $1.5 billion in a single week. There was more. During the 18 months following the segment, Food Lion sales dropped by $4.6 billion, with the loss of profits estimated at $233 million. Food Lion canceled plans to open new stores and laid off several thousand workers. So again, how is the union being a help here? Yes, we're helping workers by getting rid of their jobs, because we're getting revenge at their employers. So. Food Lion's initial impulse was to sue ABC for libel, given the distortions and inaccuracies that marred the segment. But on sober examination, lawyers for the grocery suggested otherwise. As stated by Richard L. Wyatt Jr. of the Washington firm of Aiken, Gump, Strauss, Hauer, and Feld, As every media organization well knows, the United States Supreme Court, in the interests of providing maximum protection to free speech, has made libel cases so difficult to win that even demonstrably false speech, like Primetime Live's show on Food Lion, is protected. Wyatt continued that merely proving that the segment was false would not suffice. Food Lion would also have to prove ABC's actual malice, i.e., that ABC knew the statements on the show were false or recklessly disregarded their falsity. Moreover, unlike in most other civil litigation, Food Lion could not prevail by proving that ABC had probably acted with actual malice. Libel requires proof of actual malice by the difficult, clear, and convincing evidence standard. At the time, Food Lion lawyers now say they had no idea of the scope of ABC's falsification, for they had not seen the unused footage taken by the undercover producers. So they sued ABC under provisions of North Carolina law concerning fraud based on the false job application submitted by Lytton Barnett, trespass because ABC gained access to Food Lion properties under false pretenses, and civil conspiracy. Additionally, the two producers were sued for breach of the duty of loyalty under provisions of what lawyers call the serving two masters rule. One of the lawyers for Food Lion told us the chain had a slam dunk case given ABC's on-air admissions of how it got the story through undercover work. Food Lion filed a separate suit against the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Under RICO, the suit charges a conspiracy including the UFCW, the Camber Group, a Washington public relations firm which works for the UFCW and union, and various union officials. Food Lion demanded copies of the 45 hours of undercover video which ABC made during its research. ABC stalled, claiming the tapes were privileged. Not until the first days of December 1992 did ABC surrender some 43 hours of videotapes, but in a form in which much of the sound was inaudible. Unbeknownst to Food Lion at the time, ABC withheld almost 3 other hours of tape. The delay was significant, for it exceeded the 1-year statute of limitations on filing a libel suit. Tell me that wasn't deliberate. Tell me they weren't deliberately running out the clock on the libel suit just to avoid. They did not want him adding libel to the other charges. The opposing lawyers spent 3 years wrangling over the tapes, whether ABC would supply missing footage in usable fashion, and whether ABC could withhold certain interviews on the grounds of journalistic privilege. That additional footage was not produced until February 1996. As Food Lion lawyers stated, given this series of events, one must ask, if the tape supported ABC's position in this dispute, and if ABC had nothing to fear from its own tapes, why did the network go to such extraordinary lengths to keep the tapes out of Food Lion's hands? Yep, and there's a lot more to this story that we're just about to get to, but personally my voice is starting to go, so I'm going to take a little break. There's going to be an edit, and we'll pick right up with the rest of the story after the finger snap. Okay, part 4, the truth about the tapes. So we're talking here about the video outtakes, and just thinking back on my recollection of when all of this happened, they were talking about all the business they lost and the stock that they lost, but as far as the Food Lion customers were concerned, at least in my area, no one believed it. Because, everyone went to Food Lion, everyone shopped at Food Lion, we knew people who worked at Food Lion. No one believed it, and with good reason, as it turns out, because the outtakes established the extent of ABC's fraudulent behavior. None of the undercover video supported the narrative claims about mishandling of food. Much of the supposed misconduct was done by Barnett and Litt. There were numerous sequences ABC didn't air in which Food Lion workers rejected suggestions by those two that they violate the company rules. ABC's film is so poor that the dates are indistinguishable. As we found in instances, this is accuracy in media talking, Diane Sawyer's narrative does not always match the pictures being shown. Second, and perhaps even more importantly, ABC does not establish that Food Lion workers were actually responsible for the glitches. In several instances, the outtakes show producer Susan Barnett looking at outdated food in a cooler and simply shoving it out of sight. Her job as an employee was to toss such food, so the misconduct she filmed could well have been her own. Our suspicions are intensified by the manner in which ABC selectively edited its video, leaving out material which showed supervisors instructing its undercover producers on proper procedures. In other instances, the evidence consists solely of a statement by a disgruntled unionist, the claim about dousing fish in hand and Clorox, for example. No evidence for it. And again, you would smell it. That smell lingers. Clean something in Clorox. You're just waiting for that smell to waft away. It doesn't just go away. In an exchange typical of many which challenged ABC's working premise, Lit asked employee Isaac Pack, "Do they get mad at you when you throw out a bunch of stuff?" Pack replied, "No, if you throw it away when it's bad." They're not particular on that, slightly distracted by some construction noise that's going on, but that shouldn't get on the mic. They want you to watch what you throw away. Like I said, I'm supposed to put 1 day on the fish. In the morning, I'm supposed to throw it away. That's company policy. Another worker, Brian Veltri, was shown dumping old frankfurters from a display tray. He and Barnett got into a long discussion about leftover food. "What a waste," Barnett said. "I guess you could save some of it. I'm kinda surprised." Another worker chimed, "Man, I could feed the dorm down at Coastal, which is local college, with all the food I throw away." Employee Mike Fulbright told Lit about a colleague being fired because he didn't pay attention to the color of meat in a case and reduce the price. He said there was no pressure about throwing away outdated fish. Barnett was shown telling a deli manager the date on chicken salad had expired. "Toss it," he ordered. One of the more damning segments purportedly showed Barnett talking with another employee, Pat Alcorn, the deli cook, in a conversation that implied that Food Lion intentionally sold rotten chicken. Here's the full exchange. ABC aired only the portion showed in boldface, which I've also highlighted in green. Barnett: "Really? Ooh, yeah, I believe it. I wouldn't eat it. It smelled terrible." Alcorn: "Yeah, I wouldn't cook it the other day. I refused to cook it and I dumped it." Barnett: "You threw it away?" And now we're in the aired portion. "I came in and cooked the other day, not this week, last week. I smelled the water, smelled the chicken. I went over there to get fresh packs of chicken that was in the cooler, and they were all March 31st, and it was April 8th when I was standing there cooking." Barnett: "March 31st was the expiration date and it was on April 8th? Alcorn: "And April 8th was the day I was standing there cooking, and the night before they had put March 31st meat in that water, so they had put rotten meat in that water." That was all that the viewers heard, but the conversation continued. "And it stunk and I didn't want to fix it. And they said I could go ahead and fix it, just wash it off and go ahead and fix it. And I went over and told Mr. Alexander, and I made him come over here and smell it. I told him that they told me to go ahead and fix it. He told me to dump it. Go back and get fresh chicken. Then he stood there and said, 'Use your own judgment anytime you have to.' That's what it's all about. You just got to use your own judgment, make your own decisions." And I did, and I have from then on. Now, the they giving the instructions was never identified. When she complained to a manager, and that was Alexander, he told her to toss the chicken and use her own judgment on what to cook. So again, not what viewers were shown. In another episode, ABC claimed that when chicken became outdated, Food Lion's policy was to douse it with barbecue sauce and repackage it so as to get around the expired sales date. It showed worker Pete Johnson talking to Susan Barnett. He stated, "Open them up and put them on a soaking pad, a couple of them in a tray. This way we can put 3 days date on them." True, but grossly incomplete, for Johnson was talking about something else entirely, as the full outtake showed. He had just explained to Barnett that Food Lion sometimes broke down large packages of chicken to packs containing 1 or 2 breasts and some drumsticks. ABC did not air this exchange. Johnston: You're allowed to put 3 days on that. Dale: Okay. Johnston: And put it in small packs. Dale: Okay. Johnston: Then you're allowed to put 3 days on it. Dale: All right. Johnston: Okay. Dale: Is that it's not out of date at that point, you're just breaking it down and changing it into different packs. Johnston: Right. So yeah, it wasn't out of date. It was going to be out of date in a few days, so just go ahead and repackage it and put the date on it. So according to the outtakes, Johnston instructed her to put fresh fish out for 3 days, and if anyone was left to check it, and if it was still good, sell it for an additional day for a reduced price. But what ABC put on the air was a video of a pair of hands rewrapping out-of-date fish and putting it back for 3 more days. The hands are those of Lynn Litt. That is not reporting the news, that's creating it. A Food Lion brief summarized other outtake revelations. Although Barnett suspected that some kielbasa in the deli case was moldy, she left it in the case overnight where it could have been sold to customers. She covered up that portion so that other Food Lion employees would not see it. Although Barnett suspected that a piece of salami was unsafe to eat, she left it in a place where it could be sold to customers for 6 days rather than informing deli manager Brenda Sparks of her suspicions. Although Barnett suspected the packages of chicken were out of date, she left the chicken in a place where it could be sold to customers for 4 days rather than informing Sparks of her suspicion. One clerk is shown opening packages of outdated hamburger and tossing the contents into a grinder to recycle it in with some fresh meat. The manager, Johnston, is irate when he finds that the clerk has left unwrapped hamburger in a cooler. He stated, "I'll have to catch that, expletive deleted, for not closing that, expletive deleted, up. I'll kick that, expletives deleted." I'm guessing he wasn't happy. One of the producers asked another clerk, a superior, about a tray of chicken on the counter and whether it should be put back in the cooler. "No, throw it out," the boss says. The producer turns away and in a disappointed tone of voice exclaims, "Damn." She wasn't getting the response that fit her narrative. Aw, too bad. ABC aired footage of worker Brian Veltri holding onto a sink and sliding his feet across the floor. Evidence, narrator Sawyer said that Food Lion floors are so greasy that employees have trouble walking on them. But as the outtake video showed, Veltri and a colleague, Peggy Camp, splashed soapy water on the floor while washing pots and trays at the end of a Sunday shift. Veltri, said by co-workers to be an inveterate joker, clowned around by sliding on the suds. There is no evidence of floors being greasy or of employees having trouble with their footing in any other videos. And much of the segment was devoted to allegations of off-the-clock work. During depositions, Litt was asked whether she personally witnessed any such thing. She replied, "Not that I could tell, no." The outtakes also contradicted ABC's claim about employees being forced to work off the clock. There was a long exchange with a supervisor named Pete Johnston. Litt asked, "Would you mind if I came in early just to watch? I wouldn't clock in, I would just watch." Johnston replied, "You're not supposed to do that." When Litt persisted, Johnston told her, "Oh, I knew what you was thinking. See, what they do, the first thing they do, is say you're working off the clock." Litt said, "Right, right." There is also an audio tape of Litt chatting with covert cameraman Bell. She states that she cannot prove that a man was working off the clock, saying, "Whatever it is, it's too clever for me to use or understand." Litt and the other cameraman, Hill, also discuss off-the-clock work. "Seriously, that's the way these people are," she said. "They fire people for this." Hill replies, "Throw that tape away." No, doesn't fit the narrative. We're not giving viewers the whole story. Just toss it. Both Litt and Barnett are caught on their own film in repeated violations of Food Lion rules. ABC used this film to show how Food Lion workers flaunt health regulations. The list is a long one. There is also film of a supervisor chastising Litt for doing a bad job in cleaning a saw the previous night. A bit later, she is shown exclaiming, "I don't know what the bleep I'm doing." Yeah, that's also true of being a reporter, I think. This isn't journalism. This is propaganda. That's all it is. It's all it ever really was. I mean, again, I'll point you to what H.L. Mencken or Thomas Jefferson had to say about the newspapers of their day. This is nothing new, just kind of how it's always been. Unfortunately, whereas at the time it was called muckraking and yellow journalism and things like that, nowadays this is par for the course. It's just what they do. Let's see, we've got the next day, the hot water heater for the meat area had stopped working. A plumber, Ed King, who came in during the evening, found that someone had tampered with the hot water heater by removing a jumper wire that could not have disappeared on its own. The plumber had to return the next morning with the part needed for the repair. Gee, I wonder who could have done that. While the heat was inoperative, Litt made 2 trips into the meat department when she was not scheduled to be working, filming footage of a meat grinder which was left unwashed because of the lack of hot water. Her tapes during these visits had no sound. In Food Lion's view, putting the water heater out of action was a sure way to cause sanitation problems in the store and especially in the meat market, and Mr. King testified that in 20 years as a plumber, he had never seen a similar problem. I mean, that's just outright sabotage and vandalism there. Judge M. Carlton Tilley Jr., who heard this evidence presented during the trial, commented, "I have seen people tried on less evidence than that in criminal cases and convicted." Sawyer claimed that meat cutting equipment routinely went uncleaned and that producers never saw the blade or wheels being broken down for cleaning, but in fact, cleaning this very equipment was one of the tasks assigned to the producers. And in one instance, a producer who was assigned to clean a meat room at the end of the shift left the store without doing so. There's another long outtake showing a manager walking down a counter of deli food, pointing at items and telling Barnett, "Throw that away, throw that away, throw that away." All in all, more than 20 items are tossed. Barnett mutters, "You're kidding." Another worker, apparently noting her surprise, remarks that she is usually left work when time comes to strike the hot bar. Barnett clocks out a few minutes later and goes to her car and exclaims, "God damn it." Yep, didn't fit her narrative. Couldn't get the footage she wanted. Can't get the news. So we need to create it. So what work did ABC News do beyond the flawed undercover missions? ABC did not submit any of the suspected food to labs for testing. ABC did not consult food inspection services in either North or South Carolina about Food Lion's sanitation record. In South Carolina, ABC would have found that Food Lion ranked second among the 6 major food chains, 87.4 versus an average of 85.4, surpassed only by Winn-Dixie at 88.9. I miss Winn-Dixie, they were good. ABC did go to state authorities in Florida, where Food Lion has a strong presence. On November 7, 1992, 2 days after the primetime live show, Ken Lufkin, the head of State Food and Meat Inspection, talked with a Tallahassee Democrat. Lufkin said he has been working with ABC producers for the past 3 weeks, providing them with inspection reports and allowing them to accompany inspectors on unannounced visits to Food Lion stores. Food Lion came up clean. Since this finding contradicted Primetime Live's preconceived story, it went unmentioned on the air. In North Carolina, Robert Gordon, who heads Food Inspection Services, put every inspector at his command into Food Lion stores the day after the broadcast. No violations were found. Yep, so all this then, of course, goes to trial. ABC insisted that it was exposing an imminent threat to public health, that Food Lion's misdeeds were so dastardly that the undercover work was justified. Well, consider. Litt, Barnett, and their camera crews admitted on deposition that at the very time they were exposing dangerous conditions, they were buying Food Lion deli food for lunch and dinner. Some of the food they bought was later donated to local food banks. Oh, well, that's nice. If you're really thinking the food is so terrible, we'll just give it to food banks. Yeah. No. They could not provide a single instance of any customer ever becoming ill from food brought at the stores. Kind of reminds you of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, doesn't it? All those crazy stories about, people falling into vats and being turned into lard and ground beef and stuff like that. Yeah, where's the actual evidence? Where's the actual meat that you've tested on the counter that shows the presence of human meat or rat meat or any of the other crap like that? Nope. Basically, I think anytime you hear a story like this, at this point, you should consider it to be a bunch of muckraking lies, because maybe once or twice it might be true, but on the whole, lying is the most probable explanation, as we've seen over and over again. Right, the story was first proposed to Litt on November 20, 1991 by UFCW publicist Neil Lattimore. She did not make a story proposal until the following March 16th, so several months later. Barnett, working from different sources, submitted her story proposal around the same time. They went undercover in April, and the segment did not air until November 5th, almost a year after the original tip and 6 months after the undercover investigation ended. This timeline makes hollow ABC's claim that it acted to protect public health and safety, as opposed to, getting a bunch of ratings for the sweeps period. Even after the undercover work, producer Susan Barnett would not claim that Food Lion was doing anything dangerous to the public. Here's an exchange from her deposition. At the time you went undercover at Food Lion, had you concluded that anyone's life or safety was at stake as a result of Food Lion practices? No, I had not come to any conclusions prior to undercover. Did you reach such a conclusion while you were undercover? No. ABC lawyers offered some peculiar defenses to the false employment charges, and that's basically the fact that they got hired under false pretenses, and that's not legal. You can't do that. The covert taping was not illegal, they claimed, because Food Lion never expressly told the producers they could not engage in such conduct, one pleading said. They also asserted that the North Carolina law against fraudulent employment does not apply to the news-gathering activities of the press. In other words, the media are above the laws that apply to everyone else. There was also a claim that as entry-level employees, the producers owed no fiduciary duty to Food Lion. Judge Tilley slapped aside ABC's argument that the First Amendment was broad enough to shield its conduct. To allow ABC to hide behind a qualified First Amendment privilege in order to camouflage tortious behavior on the part of its agents and employees is unacceptable. It is fundamental that the press is and should be governed by the same generally applicable laws that order the rest of society. ABC lawyers finally resorted to the presumed credibility of high-priced anchor Diane Sawyer to bolster its defense of the undercover operation. There was this exchange. But you would not have been one of the people to authorize them misrepresenting themselves to Food Lion, would you? I authorized their going in undercover based on the fact that I knew we were going to do a hidden camera story. Well, was it required that you authorize that? Yes, in the sense that it was my piece. Is your testimony here today that your authorization was required before they could go undercover into Food Lion? If I had not ascended and approved of a hidden camera investigation to Food Lion, since it was my piece, it would not have happened. The Carolina jury made short shrift of ABC's claims. In December, it awarded Food Lion $1,400 in actual damages, the wages the chain paid the undercover producers. And then on January 22nd, it ordered Capital Cities and ABC Inc. to pay punitive damages totaling $5.5 million. Richard Kaplan, executive producer of Primetime Live at the time the show aired, was ordered to pay $35,000 in punitive damages, and Ira Rosen, the senior producer, $10,750. ABC's counteroffensive started soon after the verdict. ABC News president Roone Arledge issued a statement claiming that Food Lion succeeded in persuading the jury to punish the network without ever challenging the truth of our broadcast. He told the New York Times the same day they could never contest the truth of the broadcast. What have we just been talking about this whole time? As did the challenge segment, Arledge's statements stretched the truth past the breaking point. Cokie Roberts said on Larry King Live on CNN on January 23rd that the jury did not, and no one alleges that the story was untrue. Sam Donaldson on the same show said, in fact, Food Lion did not challenge the accuracy in our report. In fact, Food Lion had denied the veracity of the report from the very day that it aired. Nonetheless, much of the media repeated ABC's claim about the chain not challenging the segment's veracity. One syndicated Washington talk show hostess, Candy Stroud, insisted to an AIM staff member the day after the verdict that Food Lion had admitted soaking spoiled fish and ham in Clorox. She seemed surprised when challenged on the facts. See, there's not even like checking each other in journalism. Journalists are supposed to check other journalists. Hey, this other outlet is making these claims about Food Lion. Is it true? Let's try and see it. Nope. They just blindly pass it on without even thinking. So Arledge wrote, by going undercover and telling a vital story about Food Lion's practices, we were following a great tradition of American journalism. Who did I mention earlier? Upton Sinclair got a job in a meatpacking plant and wrote The Jungle, which led to the introduction of meat inspection laws. Yes, 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 another bit of muck-raking yellow journalism full of nothing but lies. At least Upton Sinclair had enough integrity that he presented all of his quote-unquote findings as fiction. ABC didn't do that. It was a news report, so... Arledge is as sloppy at the history of journalism as his network is at journalism itself. In fact, Sinclair did not get a job in a plant. As he wrote in the autobiography of Upton Sinclair, published in 1962, I sat at the homes of the workers, and they told me their stories, and I made notes of everything. In the daytime I would wander about the yards, and my friends would risk their jobs to show me what I wanted to see. He even says that they were just showing him what he wanted to see. So long as I kept moving, no one would heed me. Yeah, I mean, it's just... It was all hearsay, and not even hearsay because we only have Sinclair's word for the fact that anyone even told him that. Certainly couldn't find anyone to testify as witnesses about, people falling into machinery and being sold as lard, but... The Reliable Sources panelists compared ABC's Food Lion caper to a sting operation conducted by law enforcement officers, but they missed the essential difference. A law enforcement sting gathers evidence to be used to prosecute individuals suspected of engaging in illegal activities. In court, the defendants are permitted to present the best defense their attorneys can muster. The ABC attack on Food Lion, like Mike Wallace's attack on General William Westmoreland in a CBS documentary on Vietnam in the 1980s, assembled evidence to be presented to millions of television viewers to convince them that Food Lion was guilty as charged. ABC News was the investigator, the prosecutor, and the judge. Its witnesses didn't have to face cross-examination, and Food Lion was not permitted to present its defense. The TV audience was the jury, and its verdict was predetermined by the way in which the program was edited. Trial by media lacks the protections provided to the accused in investigations by law enforcement agencies and trials in court. Yeah, it's basically the mob, that's what it is. Mob justice. Not even that, because at least in a mob, the mob's pretty much making their own decisions. This is propaganda. Promoting the public interest is secondary to getting a story that will attract attention to the TV show or the publication and increase its audience. The method all too often is to seek facts that will support a predetermined conclusion. It can do far more harm than good unless handled very responsibly. Primetime Live insulted thousands of Food Lion employees by charging that they would knowingly sell rotten food to their neighbors and friends. Such despicable behavior conceivably is fathomable to network employees who knowingly sell rotten news. Ooh. Food market employees at Food Lion and elsewhere have higher standards of personal conduct. Boom. Mic drop from Accuracy in Media there. And I mean, people are saying, well, the problem with the media these days is that it's all about the clickbait. You gotta click on that. Well, it was a similar case back in the 90s or even further, only instead about clicks, it was about ratings. That's really it. And they say, the public, as a result, no longer can trust what it sees on ABC News. Well, you can't really trust what you see on any news. That's just the facts of it. You're going to have to be skeptical. You're going to have to fact-check the fact-checkers, because you can't rely on them. Nope. Not happening. I know it's a little scary, and it means you're going to have to do some work on your own. But the truth is fathomable. You don't always have all the information. You can't quite always get to the truth, but you can kind of see the kind of stories that don't ring true, the kind of stories that kind of fall apart when you examine them. Always make sure you keep doing that. So thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the common God, shares for the share throne. Appease the gods of the algorithm by hitting like, share, and subscribe. And just get this information out there everywhere you can. Share this video, share this article. Make sure people know that this is not a new thing with the news media. It's always been about fake news. It's always been about whatever narrative they can put to sell the story of their cronies, in this case, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. That's what it's always been about. It's what it always will be about until we start demanding differently. The only way we can demand differently is just to stop paying attention to them and try and see if we can find someone more reliable to listen to. So, thank you so very much for listening. As always, keeping your eye on the truth and trying to avoid falling for propaganda and falling for, whatever kind of manipulations they're doing for you. It's just a matter of doing what I say at the end of every video, what it's always important to do. So please, always, stay strong and be free.